minutes ago in Berlin, it happened. An incredible turn in favor of Ukraine. Crimea is being cut off from the Russian Federation. The first details. Donbas is about to hit Putin personally. The armed forces of Ukraine have launched a new Chornobayivka. The Russians can't even catch their breath. And then a new strike. The West stands with Ukraine, support that knocked the ground out from under the dictator. Russia is in complete isolation. Orban and Fico didn't help. The world has cut off the Kremlin's financial lifeline. Disaster has finally crept up on the enemy. The blackout has reached Putin's offices. All this and more in our episode Hell Point. Breaking news, Volodymyr Zelensky's success in Berlin. Moscow has finally had its wings clipped. A shocking decision, refusal of NATO. A move that surprised everyone. Ukraine has paved its own path to peace. The US did help after all, and the world is holding its breath in anticipation. You have to see this. The dictator will be forced to renounce Donbas. The peace plan is on the table. The countdown has begun. Everything about this fateful stage of negotiations is coming up in our report in just a moment.
Ukraine tirelessly searches for at least some points of contact that could bring the end of the war closer. And one of those steps was taken in Germany.
There is a sense that this is truly the last attempt. If this negotiation initiative fails, everything will return to the battlefield. In
Berlin, perhaps the most sensitive round of negotiations since the start of the full-scale invasion took place. Negotiations during which Ukraine publicly made it clear for the first time. For the sake of ending the war, it is ready to consider compromises that until recently were thought impossible.
In my view, the most important thing is that the plan is as fair as possible first and foremost for Ukraine, because it was Russia that started this war. And above all, it must be feasible. The plan really shouldn't just be a piece of paper, but a significant step toward ending the war, quotes the New York Times, citing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
As Western media report, during 5 hours of negotiations, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky agreed to abandon the pursuit of joining.
NATO. The very tough and unwavering position of the United States, which is absolutely and unequivocally against Ukraine joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, taking into careful consideration the significant reluctance of certain key European countries for us to formally join NATO, and furthermore, the complex geopolitical implications of such a move. The prospect of Ukraine joining NATO, it has been lost, and obviously the president made this decision for himself, believing that it could make the Russian Federation more willing to negotiate, and the American side sees that we, on our part, are ready for a serious and constructive solution.
For Kyiv, this is a significant step. Since the beginning of the Great War, Ukraine has consistently sought NATO membership as the only guarantee capable of preventing a new invasion. Moreover, this course was enshrined in the Constitution. A year ago, abandoning it seemed politically impossible.
From the very beginning, Ukraine aspired to join NATO. These are real security guarantees. Some partners from the US and Europe did not support this direction. Thus, today there are bilateral security guarantees between Ukraine and the United States. Guarantees similar to Article 5, which the US provides us, as well as security guarantees from our European colleagues and other countries like Canada and Japan. This is an opportunity to prevent another one. A Russian invasion, quotes Reuters from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
However,
this is precisely where the fundamental and most significant differences truly begin to manifest. It is crucial to understand that Ukraine is absolutely not receiving this vital assistance for free, as some might mistakenly believe. On the contrary, Ukraine is receiving this invaluable support and essential aid in direct exchange for the incredibly courageous and unwavering defense we are mounting with immense determination and sacrifice against the utterly brutal, aggressive, and undeniably terrorist Russian regime, a regime that relentlessly and gravely threatens the peace, stability, and indeed the very security of not just a single nation, but of the entirety of Europe and the broader international community.
The American vision for ending the war is much harsher. It envisions not only abandoning the course toward NATO, but also making territorial concessions, particularly regarding areas in eastern Ukraine that are currently under Kyiv's control. In one of the options proposed by the American side, there is even talk of creating a so-called free economic zone. a buffer between territories controlled by Ukraine and lands occupied by Russia. But behind this diplomatic term lies a simple question: who has to leave and from where?
Right now, the American side is actually pressuring us into serious compromises, most of which we are not ready to accept because these compromises play in unison with Russian logic and are unacceptable and unconstitutional for us.
Obviously, this significant statement came as a considerable surprise to Russia. The Russian side is now diligently preparing its official response, carefully preparing its own comprehensive proposal.
Again, we don't understand anything about the chances of success. And this is because the Kremlin's position is no less unclear, no less opaque. Well, and in the minds of the decision makers, there is some kind of formula, what losses, what kind of damage, what sacrifices they are still willing to make, and for the sake of achieving which goals.
Meanwhile, in Berlin, during the second round of consultations between the Ukrainian and American delegations, according to AFP, the American side continues to pressure Kyiv to give up Donbas as part of a possible peace settlement. However, for Volodymyr Zelensky, this issue remains a red line. Ukraine is not ready to cross it, even under pressure from its allies. Right now, Crimea is on fire. Ukrainian forces are delivering powerful strikes, breaking through Russian defenses on the peninsula. Russian air defense systems cannot withstand the pressure. There is panic in the Kremlin, and Donbas is next. Military targets are disappearing from the map one after another, and the situation is getting out of control. Ukraine is clearly entering a new phase of the war, a turning point that could change the course of events. The only question is whether this will mark the beginning of the liberation of the temporarily occupied territories. More on this in just a moment. Crimea and Donbas are coming home. The armed forces of Ukraine are moving into the active phase of liberating the occupied territories. Strikes targeted sites in occupied Donetsk, and then Crimea followed. The Ukrainian armed forces are systematically knocking out the rear and command of the Russian army in the occupied territories.
For example, the fact that air defense systems are being destroyed on the territory of the Crimean Peninsula forces the Russians to constantly send new units of equipment to Crimea to compensate for their losses. At present, they are not producing as much air defense equipment as is being destroyed or damaged every month, and they are forced to pull all this equipment from other positional areas.
On December 13th, a wave of drones struck the entire Crimean Peninsula. The explosions did not stop for 2 hours. And on the night of December 14th, our military struck 2 fuel and lubricant depots and a valuable radar station for air defense systems.
In Crimea itself, the positional areas are located in a confined space, which makes it easier for us to target especially expensive, rare, and unique assets like radar stations. Recently, a Kasta radar was destroyed, and after that, a KS-400 Triumph radar was also destroyed. These are one-of-a-kind units. To produce just one such radar station, it was necessary for the Russian military-industrial complex.
The Ukrainian armed forces also attacked a train carrying fuel for the Russian army and a local oil refinery. As a result, reports of fuel shortages are already coming in from Simferopol. Ukrainian forces are systematically destroying the military infrastructure that Russia uses to wage war.
This particular situation has a significant, profound, and indeed a very long-term global impact on Russia's overall defensive capabilities and strategic posture. And at some point, it will be completely unable to defend itself in its own airspace, or even to hold the line at certain ground locations. In other words, that's exactly where things are heading. In
Donetsk region, Special Operations Forces destroyed an enemy electronic warfare station and a UAV operator training center. Each such strike is not just a destroyed target. It's not just military infrastructure and equipment, but also disruptions in the command, supply, and planning of Russian.
the brave armed military troops. If we're talking about mainland Ukraine, and if we're talking about deep strikes into rear areas, whether on the territory of the Russian Federation itself or the temporarily occupied Crimean Peninsula, then this is the destruction of Russia's internal resources.
In addition to the strikes, active combat operations continue on the Donetsk front.
Those actions that are taking place in the temporarily occupied territories, they will inevitably lose the crucial support of their integrated air defense systems, thereby making them exceptionally vulnerable to devastating airstrikes. Consequently, whoever successfully gains complete air dominance and comprehensive control in the vast skies above will significantly and strategically ease the forward advance of their ground forces on the battlefield.
Such operations are not just an attempt to deprive Russia of fuel or equipment. This could be part of the preparation of Ukrainian forces for a counteroffensive. In
the long term, this is about the fact that we are preparing our own counteroffensive in the future. It is precisely for this counteroffensive that we must fulfill a whole set of conditions. Among them is the complete destruction of Russian air defense forces, their total elimination in order to dominate the skies. And this could be in Donetsk region, it could be in Kharkiv region, it could be in Zaporizhia, or it could be in Kherson.
Each new wave of strikes demonstrates the growing capabilities of the Ukrainian army and reduces the enemy's chances of consolidating their hold on the occupied territories. And there will be more to come, obviously.
That among 2022, 2023, and 2024, the year 2025 has become the peak and record-breaking year in terms of the number of different types and modifications of strike drones used,
as well as the use of missile weaponry. I think that in 2026 we will see completely different numbers, much higher.
Shock. Europe has shown its teeth and pressured the US, pushing through a course in support of Ukraine. Germany, France, and Britain are doing something incredible at this very moment. You have to see this. Support that lifts Kyiv up and finally destroys the Kremlin. Incredible. Americans forced Trump to turn his back on Moscow. Putin can't hide it. The West has taken a step that has decisively changed the situation. Don't miss the details about this. Coming up.
The European Union has expanded sanctions against the Kremlin's shadow fleet. 5 more individuals and 4 companies involved in supporting Russia's shadow fleet have been added to the sanctions list. These are businessmen, directly or indirectly connected to the state oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil. The latest package of sanctions shows that Europe stands with Ukraine. And in the peace negotiations currently taking place, pressure should be exerted only on the aggressor country, and not the other way around. In the old world, Germany is the driving force behind support for Ukraine. Chancellor Friedrich Merz is convinced that Putin will not stop at Ukraine in his aggressive foreign policy. That is why Europe must do everything possible to help the victim of aggression.
We firmly stand with Ukraine in order to achieve our common goals. To advance this work, we will continue to increase pressure on Moscow. And finally, we are also taking tougher measures against the shadow fleet. And we will continue to provide large-scale support to Ukraine. First and foremost, we want to use the frozen Russian assets in Europe, so that Ukraine can more actively defend itself against future Russian attacks.
Merz is convinced that Putin is interested in changing borders in Europe and restoring the Soviet Union within its former boundaries. Merz noted that this poses a huge threat, including a military one, to the countries that were once part of that empire. German analysts predicted that the Kremlin would be ready to attack NATO in 2029. However, recent airspace incursions into the EU attributed to Moscow suggest that the Kremlin may be preparing for an earlier attack. That is why Europe is obliged to help Ukraine in every possible way.
I want to tell you about NATO's position and what we must do to prevent war, even before it begins. And for that, we need to clearly understand the threat. We are Russia's next target and we are already in danger.
Britain and France are also taking an active pro-Ukrainian stance. Emmanuel Macron, before the negotiations in Berlin, wrote that he wants to achieve a just peace and security guarantees for Ukraine.
France is and will remain on Ukraine's side to build a strong and lasting peace, one that can guarantee the security and sovereignty of Ukraine and Europe in the long term. I thank all the Ukrainian, European, and American negotiators who mobilized to achieve this goal.
To ensure security guarantees for Ukraine from the United States. In the event of signing a peace agreement, European leaders held a series of conversations with US President Donald Trump to clearly convey the European position.
I am quite confident that we will succeed, and after the phone conversation with President Trump, I got a strong impression that he is ready to walk part of the path together with us, because he knows that the interests of Europeans must be taken into account, and we made this clear to him.
Pressure on the US president regarding the issue of Ukraine is coming from all sides. Recent sociological surveys in the States have shown that the overwhelming majority of Americans support comprehensive aid to Ukraine.
Most Americans continue to support military assistance to Ukraine despite the pro-Kremlin shift of Donald Trump's administration. In November, the number of Americans who support supplying weapons to Kyiv rose to 64%. Thank you! A record since the beginning of the war. This was shown by a nationwide defense survey conducted by the Presidential Foundation and the Ronald Reagan Institute. According to the survey, 79% of Americans consider Russia an enemy, and only 17% see it as an ally. Even among MAGA Republicans, the ratio is 74 to 21%.
The statements and actions of European leaders, as well as the pressure on Trump, show that the civilized world is on Ukraine's side. And in this case, we can count on a positive outcome from the lengthy negotiation process.
Sensation, apocalypse, total blackout. The regions are fading before our eyes. The drones struck with all their might. Putin's ears are still ringing. And then, an explosive surprise right in the heart of the front line. Pokrovska struck the enemy forces hard. A revenge that will go down in history. The Kupiansk cauldron completely engulfed the enemy. The Ukrainian armed forces are methodically taking out Russians in droves. Will Putin's generals dare to give the order to retreat after this? More on this in the following report.
Russia under attack. Moscow and the Moscow region were almost entirely on fire. On the morning of December 15th, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed to have allegedly shot down 130 drones.
In particular, to be more specific, the number 25, which is a significant figure over the entire duration of the event.
This refers to the vast and historically significant territory that encompasses the entire Moscow region, a crucial administrative and geographical area within the Russian Federation, known for its diverse landscapes and strategic importance. That is the area affected by Ukrainian UAVs and the so-called Ukrainian disease.
The head of the Belgorod region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, reported a missile strike on his region and serious damage to engineering infrastructure. Local public channels claim there was a strike on the thermal power plant.
At this moment, Belgorod is effectively without power. The Russian authorities have been forced to admit serious damage to what they call an engineering facility. This refers to strikes by the Ukrainian side on the Belgorod thermal power plant.
Because of the drone attack, it was loud. According to reports, Rozhmy and Rostov-on-Don, as a result, the Tech 2 power plant here has stopped operating. An air raid was recorded at the oil refinery in Astrakhan. The Astrakhan gas processing plant was also hit.
As well as the crucial gas processing plant, a vital energy infrastructure facility. These platforms, strategically located in the vast and resource-rich Caspian Sea, clearly indicate a significant and concerning expansion of the geographical scope of Ukrainian strikes, reaching further into critical Russian assets. Starting from the new year, there are plans to scale up the production of 3 types of aero-ballistic strike systems, and we're talking about the Flamingo.
And this is already Ukraine, the temporarily occupied Crimea. Her fighters are destroying 2 enemy radar systems. In these shots, National Guard fighters are destroying a Russian Tunguska on the temporarily occupied left bank of Kherson. In the Pokrovsk direction, due to a lack of logistics, the occupiers are carrying gasoline themselves. But even that doesn't save them from Ukrainian FPV drones, which are always ready to help. At
the moment, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine headquarters agents, the defense forces of Ukraine maintain a presence on 16 square kilometers.
In 2 days, almost everyone was destroyed, reports a Russian soldier about the situation in Kupiansk. The occupier notes that he and his fellow soldiers were sent to the slaughter, and it was their own
commanders who all did it. There are no possibilities for ground logistics. The main logistics are carried out using heavy UAVs. Moreover, the Russians themselves are posting this on social networks. Videos where Russian servicemen talk about how they took the last can of stew from a Ukrainian pensioner because for several days the whole unit was basically surviving on just water.
In the footage shot on a GoPro camera, it's no longer Russian commanders but Ukrainian scouts. The 92nd Brigade is clearing the forest belt of the enemy. Short bursts, quick decisions, working without pauses. The result? -4 Russians, the soldiers write. It happened. Putin's money is now on course to destroy the Kremlin. Europe did it. The valve of funds fueling the war has been shut off. And all this happened right under the noses of Orban and Fico. The dictator's friends are powerless. The collapse of the Russian Federation is closer than ever. Hungary and Slovakia are struggling with their last strength. Loud statements. A coup inside the EU. The final word belongs to Belgium. What will it be? Find out in the report in just a moment.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A reparations loan for Ukraine is getting closer. The EU has finally frozen Russian assets, eliminating one of the main threats. And it also deprives the Kremlin's main allies, Hungary and Slovakia, of the ability to block the transfer of money to Ukraine. Orban is furious, but that's no surprise.
There's absolutely nothing surprising about this behavior. Orban and all his associates are defending the Kremlin's interests. A pronounced Ukrainophobic, anti-Ukrainian policy is being waged against Ukraine, aimed at forcing Ukraine to capitulate so that Orban can benefit from it. Some assets.
But let's go through everything step by step. For months now, the EU has been searching for loopholes to provide Ukraine with a reparations loan from frozen Russian assets, each time encountering new resistance. But now a breakthrough is near. The European Union has prepared the technical framework to provide Ukraine with a reparations loan. The Council of the European Union has officially prohibited the transfer of frozen assets of the Russian Central Bank back to Russia. It has also adopted a decision to indefinitely freeze Russian assets located in Europe. The latter means that the EU will not return the frozen assets to Russia until they pay reparations to Ukraine.
This guarantees that Russian funds amounting to up to 210 billion euros will remain within the EU until Russia pays Ukraine full compensation for the damage caused. We will continue to increase pressure on Russia until it starts taking negotiations seriously.
Until now, the freeze was extended every 6 months. And this in turn created the risk that at some point the funds could be unfrozen at an inopportune moment. For example, Hungary might refuse to support the extension of the freeze next time. This could result in a catastrophic scenario. The EU would have to return the money to Russia. But Russia has not yet paid military reparations to Ukraine, which leaves all the expenses to the EU. At the moment, this threat does not exist. And quite expectedly, Orban was outraged that Hungary was sidelined from decision-making.
This is a declaration of war. Touching frozen Russian assets, appropriating them, is a declaration of war. I have never seen the seizure of 200 to 300 billion euros for Ukraine not provoke some kind of response. That just doesn't happen.
Such an attack on the EU did not leave the Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski indifferent. He reposted Orban's message claiming that the European Commission is allegedly violating European law in broad daylight and wrote, quote, "Victor has earned his Order of Lenin." Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó rushed to defend his boss. A real war of words began.
We understand that you really want a war between Russia and Europe. We will not allow ourselves to be dragged into your war. If Russia does not invade again, there will be no such war. But we understand that this time you will be on their side.
The head of Ukraine's foreign ministry, Andriy Sybiha, also responded to Orban's statement very succinctly. He simply called Orban the most valuable frozen Russian asset in Europe, and experts agree with this characterization.
Orban is a Kremlin puppet. He recently went to the Kremlin to receive instructions, so there's nothing particularly surprising about this. In fact, his foreign minister, Szijjártó, is already being called the foreign minister, not of Hungary, but of Russia. He is constantly in Moscow. That's why Orban and the entire current Hungarian government, they are completely under the Kremlin's control, carrying out all the whims dictated to them in Moscow.
But even if Orban stomped his foot, the deed is done. Hungary will no longer be able to obstruct the EU. The reparations loan is now closer to being approved. Now, the granting of the loan will be discussed at the EU leaders' meeting, which will take place this week. The decisive vote on this issue belongs to the Prime Minister of Belgium. After all, most of Russia's frozen assets are being held precisely in the Belgian Euroclear depository. But the EU has already warned that if Belgium continues to put spokes in the wheels on this issue, the same approach as with Hungary could be applied to it. Removal from decision-making.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more hellish news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you!